The ancient cedars that guarded Oakhaven's northern approach stood like skeletal sentinels against the bruised sky, their boughs heavy with the memory of rain. I remembered them taller, somehow, more vibrant. Now, a hush, thick and cloying as river mist, clung to their gnarled forms, and as my tires crunched on the gravel road, it felt less like an arrival and more like an intrusion. 20 years had passed since I last breathed this air, since I fled the suffocating quiet of my grandmother's house and the peculiar hum that always seemed to emanate from beneath the earth here. Now, that hum felt louder, a low thrum beneath my ribs. The town itself was a study in arrested decay. Homes I recalled as vibrant, painted in shades of seafoam green and sun-baked yellow, now wore a uniform pallor, the paint peeled back like flaking skin. Curtains hung limp and undisturbed behind dusty panes, hinting at lives held in suspended animation. No children's laughter spilled from open windows, no scent of wood smoke or baking bread drifted on the wind. Only the faint metallic tang of the nearby docks, usually a robust aroma, now seemed thin, diluted. I steered my sedan down Main Street, past the general store, its porch swing motionless, past the old mill, its wheel long since stilled. The silence was not peaceful. It was a hungry quiet, absorbing all sound. My own breathing seemed unnaturally loud, a frantic drum against the town's vast, unyielding stillness. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, the distinct sensation of eyes tracking my progress, though the street remained eerily devoid of life. A figure emerged from the shadowed doorway of the town hall, a man I vaguely recognized as the town clerk from my youth. He was stooped, his movements slow, deliberate. His eyes, when they met mine across the expanse of the street, held a disquieting flatness like stones at the bottom of a shallow creek. There was no flicker of recognition, no spark of curiosity, only that placid, vacant gaze. He offered no greeting, merely watched until I had passed, then retreated into the gloom, leaving the door ajar, a black aperture in the brick facade. My grandmother's house, perched on a slight rise overlooking the harbor, was exactly as I remembered it, yet utterly transformed by its solitude. The paint, once a cheerful robin's egg blue, had faded to a ghostly white. The porch swing, where she used to sit for hours, knitting and watching the boats, hung still, a faint cobweb draping its chain. The garden, her pride and joy, was a tangled wilderness of thorny brambles and forgotten roses, their petals shriveled and black. A profound sadness, sharper than any grief, settled over me. This was not merely neglect, it was an erasure. I pushed open the heavy oak door. It groaned, a sound like an old man sighing. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and something else, something indefinable, a dry mineral earthiness that seemed to emanate from the very floorboards. My grandmother's cryptic death. The phrase still echoed in my mind, a fractured melody. I remembered the telephone call from the funeral director, his voice low, measured, offering few details. And then, the memory, sharp and unwelcome, of a recent disquieting visit. A dim hospital hallway with no staff, machines quietly breathing. The antiseptic scent, the rhythmic hiss and sigh of unseen apparatus. The unnerving absence of human presence. It wasn't a place of healing, but of hushed transitions, of endings shrouded in clinical anonymity. Her death, sudden and unexplained, had pulled me back to this place I had sworn to forget. The telegram had simply stated natural causes, but the funeral director's hushed reverence and the strange, lingering stillness of the town suggested otherwise. Later that afternoon, at the small, stone-faced funeral parlor, the air was heavy with the scent of lilies and an unsettling quiet. Only a handful of townsfolk had gathered, their faces uniformly smooth, their expressions unreadable. I looked for a familiar face, a shared memory, but found only polite, distant nods. The funeral director, a gaunt man with hands like knotty roots, moved with an almost ethereal grace, his voice a low murmur that seemed to dissipate into the hushed air. "Cole," he said, his eyes, like the clerk's, flat and opaque. "It is good you have returned." His tone lacked warmth, any genuine emotion. It was merely a statement, a recitation. He merely inclined his head. I scanned the small gathering again. Mrs. Albright, the baker, stood near the coffin, her hands clasped. Her usually bustling, energetic frame was now rigid, her gaze fixed on some distant point. The usual lines of worry or joy that creased her face were gone, smoothed away, leaving a blankness that unnerved me. It was as if a vital spark had been extinguished, leaving only an echo of a person. He spoke of my grandmother's quiet life, her dedication to the town. But there was no anecdote, no warmth, no personal touch. It was a recitation of facts, devoid of the very essence of memory. It was the same sensation I'd felt on Main Street, a palpable awareness of unseen observation. I turned, slowly, scanning the faces of the few mourners. Their eyes, though not directly on me, seemed to hold a collective awareness, a shared, silent understanding that I was an anomaly, an unwelcome variable in their carefully maintained tranquility. The air grew heavy, not with grief, but with an unspoken expectation, a profound, watchful stillness that felt like a tightening noose. I was being watched, not by individuals, but by the town itself, by something ancient and patient that stirred beneath Oakhaven's quiet facade. The air in Oakhaven's small chapel tasted of damp cedar and stale grief, a scent that clung to the worn hymnals and the velvet drapes. Rain, a fine, persistent mist, blurred the stained glass depiction of a weeping angel, softening its sorrow. My grandmother's casket, a simple pine box, rested before the altar, draped in a homespun quilt I remembered from childhood. Only a scattering of townsfolk occupied the polished pews, their faces indistinct in the chapel's muted light, their silence heavier than any mournful hymn. I scanned the familiar, unfamiliar faces, a knot tightening in my stomach. The silence felt less like reverence and more like an absence, a void where memories should have stirred. After the brief, almost perfunctory service, a small gathering migrated to the community hall, its fluorescent lights humming a sickly tune above mismatched plastic tables. I spotted an old playmate, a man whose freckled face I remembered from countless summer adventures by the creek. "Elias?" I ventured, my voice feeling strangely loud in the hushed room. His eyes, once bright with mischief, were now dull, unfocused. "It's good to see you," I tried, forcing a smile. "It's been too long. I heard about grandmother." Elias nodded slowly. "A shame," he murmured, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. "He was a woman." His gaze drifted over my shoulder as if searching for a cue. "Do you remember?" I pressed, "when we used to visit her? She'd tell us stories about the old lighthouse keeper, the one who swore he saw lights under the water." A faint frown creased his brow. "Lighthouse? We absolutely did. It was a crumbling ruin on the northern bluffs, a landmark of my youth. No, Elias, the one near Black Rock Point. It's been there forever." He shook his head, a gesture of mild dismissal. "Never heard of it. Maybe you're thinking of another town." His eyes, though still fixed on me, seemed to look through me. He offered no further details, no anecdotes, no shared nostalgia. It was as if a whole chapter of his own history and mine had simply vanished. I moved on, drawn to a woman I recognized as the baker's daughter, her hair now threaded with silver. "Sarah?" "Cole, I'm so sorry about my grandmother." He offered a small, hesitant smile. "Oh, Cole. Yes, your grandmother, a quiet soul." Her eyes were kind, but distant. "She used to buy her rye bread from your father every Tuesday," I recalled, trying to jog her memory. and sometimes she'd send me down for a sugar cookie. Sarah tilted her head, a hint of confusion clouding her features. My father? He never baked rye bread, always sourdough, and Tuesdays were his day off. She paused, her brow furrowed deeper. Wait, did she even like bread? I thought she only ever bought jam. Jam. My grandmother, a woman who baked her own sourdough and scoffed at store-bought preserves, buying jam from a bakery that didn't even make rye bread? The details were trivial, yet they grated, discordant notes in the melody of my past. It was like trying to fit mismatched puzzle pieces together, only to find the image on the box was constantly shifting. They remembered my grandmother, yes, but their recollections were fragmented, inconsistent, almost generic. Her death, too, was recalled with a strange, collective vagueness. A fall, I think, one said. Just passed on, another offered. He was old, wasn't she? Murmured a third, a former teacher. No one remembered the cryptic note, the hurried phone call from the sheriff, or the unsettling details I had been given. It was as if Oakhaven had collectively agreed upon a simplified, palatable version of reality, erasing anything that didn't fit. The conversations became a slow, agonizing unraveling of my own memories. Was I misremembering? My determination, initially a fiery ember, began to flicker, threatened by a rising tide of doubt. Later, as twilight bled across the sky, painting the clouds in bruised hues of purple and gray, I found myself drawn away from the muted chatter of the community hall. I needed air, a space where my own memories wouldn't feel like ghosts. My feet, almost on their own accord, carried me towards the outskirts of town, where the skeletal remains of an old textile factory stood silhouetted against the deepening gloom. I pushed through a rusted, groaning door, the sound echoing through the cavernous space. Inside, the light was a perpetual twilight, filtering through grime-caked windows. Dust motes danced in the sparse beams, illuminating the spectral shapes of dormant machinery. No living soul was present, only the faint rhythmic sighs of dormant mechanisms echoing from deeper within the skeletal structure, like vast, unseen lungs. The quiet breathing of those unseen machines seemed to mirror the slow, methodical erasure happening all around me, and I wondered if my own mind was next. The air, thick with the scent of aged paper and something faintly metallic, pressed in on me. I had come to clear the remnants of a life I barely knew, a life that had ended with such a jarring, inexplicable finality. The thought of her, a woman of sharp wit and even sharper opinions, reduced to a quiet absence, twisted something cold in my gut. My task was to sort through her study, a room I'd only ever glimpsed from the doorway as a child, filled with towering bookshelves and the hushed reverence of untold stories. Now the shelves stood like silent sentinels, laden with volumes on local history, botany, and obscure folklore. I ran my fingers over the spines, the dry paper whispering against my skin. There was a faint tremor in my hand, a premonition of something unsettling. The desk, a heavy oak monolith, was my starting point. It was strangely neat, almost staged. A brass lamp, a leather blotter, a single unburnt candle. Too neat for my grandmother, a woman whose mind was a whirlwind of ideas, often manifesting as chaotic piles of notes and half-read books. I began to open drawers, each one sliding with a soft scrape that echoed in the quiet house. The first held neatly stacked receipts, mundane utility bills, and a collection of antique buttons. The second, a tangle of knitting needles and skeins of yarn, half-finished projects abandoned mid-stitch. Nothing. No cryptic letters, no hidden wills, just the ordinary detritus of an ordinary life. But Oakhaven was not ordinary. And my grandmother, despite her stoic facade, had never been entirely so either. My gaze drifted to the bottom drawer, deeper than the others, almost hidden by the desk's ornate carving. It resisted, a stubborn lock holding fast. I pulled harder, a surge of irritation mixing with a prickle of anticipation. With a sharp crack, the wood groaned, and the drawer gave way, revealing not another collection of mundane items, but a single leather-bound volume. It was a journal, its cover worn smooth by countless touches, the pages thick and yellowed. My grandmother's distinctive, elegant script filled the first few pages, chronicling daily observations of Oakhaven, the changing seasons, the habits of local birds. But as I flipped further, a subtle shift began. The handwriting grew more hurried, the lines less even. A language not meant for ears, but for the spaces between thoughts. My breath hitched. I remembered the odd, almost subliminal hum I'd felt since returning, a pressure behind my eyes. Further on, the entries became fragmented, laced with a growing sense of urgency. Strange symbols began to appear in the margins, intricate patterns that resembled ancient knotwork or distorted branches. Small things at first, a name, a date, then larger, faces, events. They are losing themselves, piece by piece. I thought of the baker, the way his eyes had glazed over when I mentioned rye bread. This wasn't just about my grandmother's death. It was about Oakhaven itself. Her frantic entries spoke of an ancient secret tied to the very founding of the town. Our family, a later passage warned. Almost illegible. We are the keepers, the guardians. But the veil thins. The pact breaks. The journal fell open to a page filled with a crude map, sketched alongside more of the disturbing symbols. It depicted Oakhaven, but with an elaborate network of lines converging beneath the town square, leading to a single ominous point marked only by a swirling vortex of the strange symbols. Below it, a final desperate plea. Cole, you must remember. The house, once merely quiet, now felt watchful. The silence was not empty, but pregnant with unseen presence, with the weight of her warnings. I closed the journal, its worn leather feeling suddenly alive in my grasp. The air in the study felt heavy, thick with the implication of what I'd just read. I needed to think, to process this deluge of terrifying information. Yet in its own way, it too held secrets, unspoken and unseen, much like Oakhaven itself. The ink on the page seemed to writhe, Cole's name a dark, insistent whisper against the aged paper. My grandmother's final words, etched with a frantic energy, pulsed with an unspoken urgency. Her entries grew increasingly fragmented, less coherent, filled with oblique references to the forgetting, the quiet hunger, and the great stillness. Each cryptic phrase tightened a knot of ice in my stomach. I heard things then, at the periphery of my hearing. A rustling that wasn't the wind, a faint sigh that wasn't the old house settling. The air hung heavy and still, smelling faintly of ozone and something metallic, like old pennies. The walls, painted a faded institutional green, seemed to press in, their surfaces scuffed and stained as if by countless unseen hands. Empty doorways lined the corridor, each a black rectangle promising only deeper emptiness. I moved, or perhaps floated, down the endless passage, my feet making no sound. The sun was up, but Oakhaven felt no less sinister in its pale light. The general store, usually a hub of quiet activity, felt different. The proprietor, a man whose face I'd known since childhood, greeted me with the same placid smile, but his eyes held a peculiar blankness. I remembered a young woman, a baker's apprentice, who always had a bright, infectious laugh. She'd been a fixture, always kneading dough behind the counter, her flour-dusted apron a familiar sight. Today, a different older woman stood in her place, her movements slow and deliberate. "Where's the apprentice?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "The one with the red scarf?" The proprietor blinked, a slow, deliberate movement. "Apprentice?" he echoed, his voice devoid of recognition. We've always had Mrs. Albright here." He gestured vaguely towards the older woman who continued her work, oblivious. The younger one. "He was here last year, surely." He simply shook his head, a slight, almost imperceptible frown creasing his brow. "You must be mistaken, Cole. Mrs. Albright has been with us for years." His gaze, though not unkind, held a strange, unwavering certainty that brooked no argument. It was as if the girl had never existed, wiped from the collective memory of the town. Later, walking past the old mill, I remembered the mill worker, a burly man named Silas, who used to sit on the porch during his breaks, whittling small wooden birds. His laughter, deep and hearty, had been a signature sound of the afternoon. Today, the porch was empty, the mill silent. When I asked a passing delivery driver about him, the driver merely shrugged. "Silas? Never heard of anyone by that name working here. Been old man Henderson and his son for as long as I remember." The pattern was too stark to ignore. Small, unacknowledged absences. People who had been integral parts of Oakhaven's fabric, now simply gone. No one remembered them. No one questioned their absence. It was as if the town itself had selectively forgotten, its collective memory pruned and reshaped. The entity, my grandmother's journal had implied, fed on memory. And it was hungry. It wasn't just influencing them, it was erasing them one by one from the town's consciousness. And I, the lone outsider, was beginning to see the cracks in its fabricated reality. The thought was a terrifying revelation, a truth so stark it stole my breath. The town's selective amnesia clung to me, a shroud woven from forgotten faces and silent absences. Each vacant house, each unremarked upon void, echoed the same chilling truth. Oakhaven was not just forgetting. It was being unmade. The pattern, once a whisper, now screamed in my mind. My grandmother's journal, clutched in my hand, felt heavier than its pages suggested, a small anchor against the rising tide of erasure. Her spidery script, usually a source of comfort, now held a frantic energy. A page near the end bore a crude sketch, a series of interlocking spirals, ancient and unsettling, beneath a stark, almost childlike drawing of a towering, dilapidated structure. Beneath it, a single underlined word: mill. The old mill. I remembered it from my youth, a skeleton on the outskirts, its weathered timbers a landmark of rural decay. Now it felt like the only place left where a true memory might linger. A determined resolve hardened my jaw. The morning mist still clung to the gnarled oaks as I made my way towards the edge of town, the familiar lanes feeling suddenly alien. The air, usually crisp with the scent of pine and damp earth, carried a faint, cloying sweetness, like overripe fruit left to rot. It was a smell I'd noticed before, but now it seemed stronger, almost palpable, clinging to the quiet homes I passed. No one stirred. The town slept, or perhaps simply waited. The paved road soon gave way to a cracked asphalt path, then a narrow, overgrown track, the encroaching wilderness reclaiming its own. Brambles clawed at my jeans, and the branches of ancient trees, heavy with moss, formed a tangled canopy that swallowed the light. Yet even here, a subtle wrongness permeated the air, a faint metallic tang beneath the earthy smells. Finally, through a veil of weeping willows, the mill loomed. It was larger, more imposing than my memory had allowed, a skeletal behemoth of blackened wood and rusted corrugated iron. Its vast water wheel, once the heart of its operation, hung suspended and broken like a shattered ribcage. The windows were empty sockets, staring out with blind indifference. I pushed open a sagging side door, the groan of protesting hinges a jarring shriek in the profound stillness. Dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of light that pierced the gloom from cracks in the roof. Vast, silent machines, rusted into grotesque sculptures, stretched into the vaulted space. gears, levers, and pulleys, once vibrant with industry, were now caked in grime, their purpose lost to time. Each step I took sent echoes skittering through the cavernous space, a symphony of creaks and groans from the stressed timbers above. I moved slowly, my gaze sweeping over the skeletal remains of the mill's former life. My grandmother's journal felt warm against my palm. Where would such a symbol be carved? Not on the working parts, surely, but somewhere hidden, somewhere sacred. The scale of the place was disorienting. I navigated around defunct conveyors and massive, immobile presses, each one a monument to a forgotten craft. It was older, constructed of rough-hewn stone, not the milled planks of the rest of the interior. My heart quickened. I approached, my hand instinctively reaching for the small flashlight I carried. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the stone. And there they were. Etched into the rough rock face, barely visible beneath centuries of grime and mineral deposits, were the exact spirals from my grandmother's journal. They were crude, yet intricate. A swirling vortex of lines that seemed to pull the light into their depths. The memory was fleeting, but it left an icy residue. I pushed the unsettling image away, forcing my focus back to the carvings. They pulsed with an eerie energy, an ancient hum I could almost feel beneath my fingertips. I ran my hands over the stone, searching, pushing. The wall felt solid, unyielding, but the carvings themselves seemed to be a key. Following the faint lines of the largest spiral, I pressed harder. A section of the stone, no larger than my hand, gave way with a soft click. Not a visible door, not a lever, but a pressure point. A low rumble, deep and resonant, vibrated through the floorboards beneath my feet. Dust rained down from the high rafters. Slowly, agonizingly, a section of the stone wall, cleverly disguised, began to recede inward, revealing a narrow, gaping maw of absolute blackness. It was a passage, not a natural cave, but clearly man-made, descending steeply into the earth. No light penetrated its depths. This was it. This was the secret Oakhaven had forgotten, the truth my grandmother had tried to preserve. My grandmother's final fractured words, the unsettling uniformity of the townsfolk, the gnawing emptiness where memories should have been. It all led here, to the yawning blackness beneath the old mill. I had to descend. There was no other choice. The entrance, a crudely shored-up shaft, dropped away steeply, its rough-hewn steps slick with a persistent moisture. The passage narrowed quickly, the weight of the earth pressing in from all sides, a geologic embrace. The tunnels twisted, a labyrinthine tangle of rough-hewn rock and compacted soil, the air growing heavier with each turn, laden with the smell of decay and an unfamiliar cloying sweetness. My mind struggled to reconcile the crude construction with the sheer depth I was reaching. Who had carved this, and for what purpose? My light danced across towering, uneven walls, revealing a crude dome overhead. On the floor, arranged in concentric circles around a central depression, were stones. Not natural formations, but smooth, river-worn stones, meticulously placed. Interspersed among them were fragments of bone, bleached and brittle, their origins unclear. Some were impossibly thick, others slender and curved, hinting at creatures that no longer walked the earth. This wasn't merely an old mine or a natural cave system. My gaze swept across the chamber, catching on strange etchings on the walls, symbols that defied any known language, intricate patterns that seemed to shift and writhe at the periphery of my vision. They were not carved, but seemed to have been grown into the stone, organic lines forming geometric impossibilities. Then, a low thrumming began, a vibration that resonated up through the soles of my boots, a soft, rhythmic pulse that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the chamber. My headlamp swung towards the sound, revealing a grotesque spectacle in the central depression. There, nestled amongst the ritualistic stones and ancient bones, was a growth. It was not rock, nor plant, nor flesh, but something horrifyingly in between. It was a vast, amorphous mass, a pulsating, translucent membrane stretched taut over an unseen internal structure. The mass was rooted to the earth, spreading outwards like a cancerous bloom, its surface slick and glistening. It was alive, undeniably, monstrously alive. It was like the deep, measured intake and release of a colossal lung. I stared, transfixed, my own breath catching in my throat. The horror was no longer an abstraction, a creeping suspicion. It was here, tangible, a sickening, organic presence. As I focused on the rhythmic breathing of the growth, the chamber around me seemed to shimmer. The rough stone walls blurred, stretching and whitening, the cavernous space suddenly contracting, becoming narrower, sterile. For a disorienting instant, the humid, earthy air vanished, replaced by the faint antiseptic tang of something clinical. My vision swam. I saw not stone, but smooth, pale walls, receding into an impossible distance. I heard not the drip of water, but the distant metallic click of unseen mechanisms, the thrumming of the growth, the rhythmic exhalation, twisted into something else entirely. The quiet, mechanical sighs of unseen ventilators. I was no longer in a subterranean chamber. The hallucination was so vivid, so complete, that for a terrifying moment my mind believed it. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the encroaching unreality. The pulsating mass still thrummed, its golden veins still pulsed, and the air still carried its cloying, sweet decay. The entity wasn't just beneath Oakhaven. It was reaching into me, twisting my perceptions, asserting its terrible will. It was feeding, and I, a solitary intruder, was standing at its very maw. My grandmoth. My grandmother's last fractured words, scrawled on the back of a grocery list. The deep remembers, the surface forgets, they drink the quiet tide, had been a compass needle pointing downward. Now, with the town's unraveling accelerating, fear was a luxury I could no longer afford. The air in the passage grew heavier with each step, thick with the scent of wet earth and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood mixed with decaying leaves. A narrow, crumbling corridor, its concrete slick with condensation, stretched before me. The air here was strangely still, devoid of the natural drafts that permeated the caverns above. Then, a sudden, jarring shift. The rock walls abruptly transitioned to stained, peeling plaster. The concrete floor changed to cracked linoleum. The machines, quietly breathing, were hulking, archaic metal boxes tucked into alcoves, their tubing snaking into the walls. They weren't medical devices, not truly. Their low, rhythmic exhalations felt more like a slow, mechanical pulse, a deep, inhuman respiration that made the fine hairs on my arms stand upright. This place was a forgotten ventricle, a relic of some forgotten subterranean purpose, now repurposed by the thing that claimed Oakhaven. The hallway ended at a heavy, rusted door, slightly ajar. I pushed the door open, the groan of protesting metal echoing too loudly in the suffocating quiet. The space beyond was vast, a natural cavern expanded and shaped by unknown hands. Stalactites dripped sluggishly, each drop echoing like a distant footfall. But it was not the cavern itself that seized my breath. It was the gathering within. Dozens of townsfolk stood in concentric circles, their backs mostly to me, facing a central pulsating column of what looked like solidified gloom. The amber light emanated from this column, flickering and intensifying in time with the quiet, rhythmic hum that now filled the cavern. Their forms were unnervingly still, their movements imperceptible save for a subtle sway, like reeds in an unseen current. I recognized them. The shopkeeper, whose eyes had grown so distant these past weeks, the old librarian who had once known every local story, the taciturn fisherman whose boat now drifted empty in the harbor. Even a distant cousin whose face I had almost forgotten was among them. Their faces, when I caught glimpses, were slack, devoid of individual expression. It was not unconsciousness, but something far worse, an unconsciousness. Their lips moved, but no sound emerged, only a collective, soft exhalation. Yet I could feel it. A low, resonant thrum that vibrated through the cavern floor, a slow, deep current of shared thought. Fragmented images flickered across the surface of the central column, like dreams projected onto smoke. A child's laughter, the scent of baking bread, the feeling of sunlight on skin, a specific memory of a summer storm, the sharp tang of pine needles. These were not singular memories, but coalesced impressions, swirling and merging, losing their individual edges, becoming part of a vast, silent consciousness. They were not just forgetting, they were giving. They were feeding the entity, becoming threads in its monstrous tapestry. A powerful, insidious pull began to tug at me, a gentle, insistent current in the unseen air. Surrender, Cole. Let go. Join us. The weight of self is heavy, but here, there is only quiet, only belonging. Your memories, your anxieties, your pain, they can all be shed. Become part of the whole. Become nothing, and yet everything. My own memories, sharp and distinct, began to ripple within me, threatening to detach, to float free. The entity craved them. It wanted to absorb them, to dissolve them into the communal hum. The lure was terrifyingly potent, a seductive balm promising release from the burden of individuality. I clutched my lantern, its frail light a defiant flicker against the encroaching amber. The tendrils were inside me, not of flesh, but of phantom thought, reaching for the shimmering fragments of my past. My grandmother's knowing smile, a warmth that had always anchored me, began to fray at the edges, dissolving into a diffuse light. The rough texture of my father's calloused hand, guiding my own as I learned to knot a fishing line by the murky river, thinned into a whisper of sensation. Even the joy of a perfect Oakhaven sunset, painted in hues of bruised plum and burning orange, blurred into an undifferentiated glow. The entity craved them all. A cold dread, unlike any I had ever known, seized me. My very eye threatened to unravel. I fought back with a primal ferocity, a desperate clench of the mind, a desperate refusal to let go. These were anchors, raw and immediate, too new for the entity to have fully softened. With a wrenching internal heave, I tore myself free. Or at least, I believed I did. The air, heavy and still, pressed in on me, smelling of stagnant water and something vaguely mineral, like wet earth and ancient iron. My lungs burned with the effort, each breath a ragged gasp. It wanted me back. It wanted all of me. I pushed through a heavy, rusted door, its hinges groaning in protest, and found myself in a different kind of subterranean space. Before me stretched a long, eerily silent passage, lined with dulled off-white panels. Wires snaked along the baseboards, disappearing into recesses, hinting at power sources and connections far deeper than I could comprehend. This section, perhaps an abandoned medical facility within the sprawling underground complex, felt alien, a relic of a time before the entity's full awakening. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped within a cage. I leaned against a cold metal trolley, its wheels silently locked, and let the sheer terror wash over me. The entity didn't kill in the traditional sense. There were no bodies, no blood-soaked altars. It consumed identity. It assimilated memory, experience, personality. The townsfolk weren't merely puppets. They were already fragments, their minds slowly dissolving into the collective, their memories fractured because they were no longer truly their own. My grandmother hadn't simply died. He had been trying to resist, to warn me. Her cryptic notes, her hurried research, the strange symbols she'd sketched in the margins of her journals. They were not the ramblings of a senile mind, but a desperate guide. He had been charting the entity's growth, its methods, its weakness. The key lay in severing its connection, cutting off its access to the collective consciousness it was slowly devouring. My grandmother's research, hidden in the old house, now became my desperate anchor. There were diagrams, half-finished equations, and references to specific geological formations beneath Oakhaven. He had spoken of a nexus, a central point where the entity's influence was strongest, where its roots truly burrowed into the bedrock of the town. If I could reach that nexus, if I could find a way to disrupt its feeding, perhaps I could break its hold. The path ahead was shrouded in danger, not of teeth and claws, but of losing myself, of becoming another faceless whisper in the entity's endless hum. I would not let it happen. I pushed off the trolley, the metallic clang echoing in the silent hallway. My hands trembled, but my purpose was clear. I would return to the house, retrieve her notes, and find the way to strike back. The tendrils, not of flesh but of phantom thought, still writhed within me. This silent, insidious theft was a violation far deeper than any physical wound. It was the erasure of self, the unmaking of my very being. I could feel the entity's vast, hungry presence, a quiet hum beneath the town, a void aching to consume all that was vibrant and individual. I gripped the worn leather of my grandmother's journal, its pages a fragile bulwark against the encroaching emptiness. Its weight in my hand was a comfort, a whisper of defiance. My feet led me almost instinctively to the periphery of town, to an abandoned wing of what had once been a processing plant for the old mill, now a desolate labyrinth of corroded pipes and rusting machinery. I found my way into a section that felt eerily distinct from the rest of the factory's industrial decay. Empty gurneys stood sentinel against walls that once gleamed white, now peeling in brittle flakes. The machines, large, inscrutable contraptions with blinking amber lights, exhaled and drew breath with a soft, rhythmic hiss. Their purpose long since vanished, yet their presence was a peculiar, unsettling comfort in this desolate space. No one was here, no other souls to blur the edges of my own fading memories. I sank onto a cracked vinyl bench, the journal open before me. My fingers traced the delicate looping script, searching for any pattern, any anomaly. My grandmother's words were a river of half-truths and veiled warnings, charting the entity's slow, deliberate consumption of Oakhaven. She wrote of the silent hunger, of threads spun from forgotten moments, and of the anchor, a place or object that tethered the entity to this reality. Beside it, a passage in a bolder, more urgent hand. Memory is the shield. Collective memory, the sword. To remember is to exist. The entity wasn't just feeding on memories. It was weakened by their active retention, by the conscious act of remembering. And the anchor. It wasn't just a point of origin, but perhaps a vulnerability. The journal spoke of a ritual, simple yet profound, involving the telling of tales, the sharing of light, and the binding of fragments. It was a call to reclaim what was lost, to flood the entity's silent hunger with the vibrant, chaotic beauty of individual lives. I closed the journal, its weight suddenly immense. The breathing machines in the hallway seemed to sigh in unison, a low, mechanical lament. Stepping back into the muted light of the town square, I felt the entity's presence pressed down like a shroud. The townsfolk moved with their characteristic, unsettling uniformity, their eyes vacant, their faces smooth as polished stone. Yet I knew there were some, perhaps those whose grasp on their past was stronger, or those only recently touched, who might still flicker with a spark of their former selves. I approached the shopkeeper who stood behind his counter, mechanically dusting empty shelves. "Do you remember the day the old oak fell?" I asked. my voice cutting through the pervasive hush. The storm that brought it down. How the whole town gathered to clear the road. His hand paused mid-air, a faint tremor running through him. A shadow of an expression, fleeting and unreadable, crossed his face. The moment was gone, a phantom limb of memory. Further down the street, I found an elder, hunched on a bench, staring at nothing. "Your granddaughter," I began, my voice soft but insistent. "Do you remember her laughter? The way she used to chase the gulls down by the docks, her red scarf flying in the wind?" A low groan escaped his lips, a sound of profound discomfort. He clutched his head, his fingers digging into his scalp. A flash of pain, or perhaps recognition, contorted his features. The docks. A tear, thick and slow, tracked a path down his weathered cheek. But just as quickly, the tension eased. His hands fell to his lap, and his face smoothed back into its customary vacant calm. The tear remained, a single glistening monument to a memory almost reclaimed. The entity's hum intensified, a low thrum against my teeth, a pressure behind my eyes. It knew what I was doing. It was fighting back, trying to smooth away the ripples I was creating. But those flickers, those brief, fragile returns, they were proof. They were hope. The journal's words echoed in my mind. The binding of fragments. It wasn't enough to simply recall. They had to share. They had to actively engage in the act of remembering, to weave their individual threads into a collective tapestry that the entity could not unravel. I looked at the silent, uniform faces around me, at the town that was slowly, inexorably, becoming a blank slate. My grandmother's final entry, bolder and more desperate than the rest, screamed from the page in my mind. The anchor must be severed. Memory is the only axe. I had to find this anchor, this core of the entity, and make Oakhaven remember itself, before it was too late, before Oakhaven became nothing more than a ghost of a name, whispered into the wind. The metallic tang of ozone still clung to my tongue, a phantom echo of the jolt that had brought me to this strange, liminal space. My fingers, still pressed against my throbbing temples, felt the rough stubble of my unshaven jaw. The whispered words, the docks, the gulls, were a fractured shard of memory, or perhaps a premonition, that had burst through the haze of whatever had taken hold of me. A profound discomfort still gnawed at the edges of my perception, but beneath it, a cold, unyielding resolve had begun to harden. My eyes adjusted to the weak, fluorescent glow that flickered from recessed panels in the ceiling. The walls, painted a faded institutional green, bore scuff marks and the faint outlines of where pictures once hung. A strange, antiseptic scent, layered with something else, something earthy and damp, like old stone and forgotten soil, permeated the air. I pushed myself upright, my muscles stiff, my joints aching. Each step I took sent a dull throb through my skull, but I ignored it. The path was clear, or at least the need for a path was undeniable. Oakhaven was not lost yet. I was not lost yet. The hallway stretched, seemingly endless, before curving sharply to the left. As I rounded the bend, the gentle hum of the unseen machinery began to deepen, shifting from a mechanical drone to something more organic. A low, resonant vibration that seemed to even emanate from the very floor beneath my worn boots. The air grew heavier, cooler, carrying with it a faint, sweet smell, like damp earth mixed with decaying flowers. I followed the deepening hum, which now pulsed with a subtle rhythm, like a vast, slow heartbeat. The green walls gave way to exposed concrete, crisscrossed with thick, rusted pipes. The ceiling rose, revealing a network of grimy ventilation shafts that disappeared into the gloom above. This was not the sterile environment of a modern facility. This was an older subterranean labyrinth, a network of forgotten passages beneath Oakhaven. The air became thick with dust and the metallic scent of damp iron. Soon, the passage opened into a cavernous space, a massive, echoing chamber carved from the earth itself. And there it was. It was not a machine, nor a creature in any sense I understood. It was a vast, organic mass, filling the entire chasm, pulsing with a faint internal light that shifted from an ethereal milky white to a deep, bruised violet. It breathed, a slow, silent expansion and contraction that caused the very air to stir. Tendrils, like roots of a titanic tree, snaked outwards, disappearing into cracks in the rock, some even reaching towards the ceiling, swaying with an imperceptible current. This was the core. This was the entity. As I stared, a wave of profound dizziness washed over me. It wasn't just sight. It was a sensory overload that bypassed my eyes and hammered directly at my mind. These weren't my memories, yet they felt intimately familiar, like distant echoes of dreams I'd never had. The entity was a vast, silent consciousness, a collective memory made manifest. It was drawing me in, not with physical force, but with an insidious psychic gravity. I could feel my own thoughts, my own sense of self, beginning to thin at the edges, dissolving into the overwhelming current of shared experience. I clenched my fists, digging my fingernails into my palms, forcing the sharp physical pain to ground me. I took a step forward, then another, descending the slick incline towards the pulsating heart of the mass. The air grew heavier, thick with the weight of generations. Memories, my own distinct, cherished memories, began to surface, rising in defiance. My grandmother's smile, the feel of her rough, kind hand, the scent of her lavender soap. These were mine. The entity responded. The light within it flared, pulsing brighter, faster, a dizzying kaleidoscope of stolen lives. I felt a pressure building behind my eyes, as if my skull were too small to contain the onslaught. It was probing, searching for weakness, for a point of entry. It wanted to assimilate me, to make me one with its vast, silent unity. It offered peace, a release from individual struggle, a quiet oblivion. But I saw the cost. I saw the blank faces in Oakhaven, the vacant stares, the lost spark. That was not peace. It was erasure. I pushed back. I focused on a single defiant memory. The feel of the rough, salty spray on my face at the docks, the cry of the gulls overhead, a specific, vivid moment of pure, unadulterated self. I held it like a burning ember in the storm of its collective consciousness. The entity pulsed, a slow, deep throb that resonated through my bones. I saw flashes of my childhood, distorted, recontextualized within its vast, impersonal framework. My first bike ride, my first scraped knee, the taste of my mother's apple pie, all becoming generic, universal, losing their unique coldness. A guttural cry escaped my lips. This was a battle of wills, a desperate, brutal struggle for the very essence of my being. I poured all my anger, all my fear, all my love for the Oakhaven that was, into that single defiant spark. I projected my sense of self, my individual narrative, against its silent, overwhelming unity. I would not be forgotten. The rhythmic hiss and sigh of unseen ventilators, the soft, distant thrum of a generator, filled the sterile air. Fluorescent lights, some flickering with a sickly yellow glow, cast long, wavering shadows down the endless corridor. My own breath hitched, a rasp in the oppressive quiet. My mind, still reeling from the psychic feedback, struggled to grasp the reality of this hallway. Was I truly here? Or was this a final, desperate projection of the entity? A last attempt to assimilate me into its silent, sterile consciousness? A faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated through the material, vibrating against my skin. A deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. It was the same sound I'd heard beneath Oakhaven, magnified, distilled, now fading. Then, the air itself seemed to crackle, not with ozone, but with a tearing sound, like old paper rending. The rhythmic hiss sigh of the machines sputtered, choked, and died. A profound, absolute silence descended, heavier than any I had ever known. My chest tightened, a crushing weight of emptiness pressing in. The hallway dissolved, not with a flash, but with a slow, agonizing unraveling, like a tapestry coming undone thread by thread. The walls blurred, the floor liquefied, and the air turned thick and viscous, pulling at my limbs as if I were swimming through molasses. Then, a sudden jarring shift. My eyes snapped open, blinking against the muted gray light of dawn. I was no longer in the endless hallway. The air was heavy with the scent of wet soil and decaying leaves, a familiar aroma that grounded me instantly. This was the edge of Oakhaven, the old woods I had traversed countless times. The entity was gone. I felt it, a vast, echoing emptiness where a suffocating presence had once been. Slowly, I pushed myself up, my muscles aching with a profound weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. The town, nestled in the valley below, looked different. Not physically altered, but imbued with a strange, fragile aura. As I walked towards the first scattering of houses, a low, keening sound drifted on the wind. It was human, raw, and filled with an unbearable sorrow. I saw them then, scattered in the town square, on their porches, wandering aimlessly down the main street. The shopkeeper stood before his empty storefront, tears streaming down his face, muttering, "The flower. The bells. Where are the bells?" His hands, gnarled with age, clutched at his chest as if trying to hold on to something intangible. The elder, usually so composed, sat on the steps of the old town hall, rocking back and forth, chanting a name I didn't recognize, a name that seemed to dissolve on his lips before it could fully form. I remember some of them. Her gaze was distant, unfocused, as if seeing beyond the present moment, into a fractured past. The collective silence was broken, replaced by a cacophony of quiet grief and bewildered confusion. Some wept openly, mourning memories they couldn't quite articulate, a sense of profound loss etched onto their faces. Fragmented memories, like shards of broken glass, flickered in their eyes, sharp and painful for some, elusive and frustrating for others. Oakhaven was irrevocably scarred. The ancient entity was gone, but its passing had left a gaping wound in the town's very soul. The vibrant tapestry of shared history, woven through generations, had been torn, leaving frayed ends and gaping holes. The air, once thick with the entity's subtle hum, now felt too thin, too empty. I walked among them, a ghost in my own ancestral home, my heart heavy with a sorrow that mirrored theirs. I had saved Oakhaven from ultimate erasure, but what remained was a traumatized, fractured echo of itself. A profound choice lay before me, a chasm opening at my feet. I could leave, turn my back on the pain, the confusion, the lingering horror, and try to forget the silent consciousness that had nearly claimed me. Or I could stay. Stay and try to help them rebuild, to piece together the shattered fragments of their lives, to be an anchor in their storm of confusion. It would be a lifetime of navigating a landscape of grief and fractured minds, a constant reminder of the insidious entity that had nearly devoured us all. Their eyes, some meeting mine with a flicker of recognition, others passing through me as if I were another ghost in their waking nightmare, pleaded for something I wasn't sure I possessed. I stood there, rooted to the scarred earth, the weight of Oakhaven's broken heart pressing down on my own, the choice a heavy, burning ember in my soul.